stories is that it's starting to look incompetent. Take a listen.
Are you intending to send a message?
I find that offensive. No.
Hopefully people will get the message.
It's not a policy.
This is not a policy that people are excited about, Hallie.
We have a law in this country, okay? And I've already talked about my capacity for compassion.
Does not mandate
the way we all
separating
feel.
kids and
Hold
families.
On. Christopher, nobody said it did.
We have to break up families. The Democrats gave us that law.
We do not have enough immigration judges that can actually get to these cases.
We don't want judges. We want security on the border.
Congress alone can fix it.
We want to keep families together. It's very important. I'll be signing something in a little while that's going to do that.
And that's my point here. All the contradictions. At what point does this become incompetency? And the reason I ask is that incompetency was the final straw for the Bush years in '06. Katrina was the incompetency straw that broke the back.
Yeah, and are they really cleaning it up? I think this is Cahill's point away. I mean, he did an executive order. There's no evidence they've seriously stepped back and said, what legal changes do we need? What do we need to do in court? What bureaucratic changes do we need to make in order to have a reasonable resolution of this particular aspect of the immigration problem? That's what a serious administration would do.
Mark Short would be helping to write the legislation now, right?
Of Katrina, and it was horrible for the first couple of weeks. They fired people. They had serious people suddenly take charge. They put money into New Orleans. They had an actual policy of what to do with the people, et cetera. That's true after other screw-ups. Right. And there's no evidence there at all serious about that. And it is going to leave a mark because it's real. It has real effects. Someone compared it the other night with, well, it's, Trump is always good at these things. He demagogues them, the NFL players taking a knee and so forth. But that's all just symbolism. I mean, no, the NFL players didn't suffer because Trump attacked them. The suffering continues.
That's the critical point, because it's not simply the incompetence. Incompetence is a problem for presidents when they are 500-plus days into their terms. It's the lack of compassion. That's what the seeming indifference, whether it was fair or not, of President Bush during Katrina. Right. But that was a apparent lack of caring about an act of God. This is not an act of God. This is an act of Trump, and he and his policy, no matter when they say it's not, and the lack of apparent caring. It's not that I don't know how to run this government. It's that we're hearing the cries of crying children.
Look at I got to play. The magazine covers are out. Time, yeah. New Yorker are out. The Time one you've probably seen. The New Yorker's right near here. So the crying child with President Trump, and then here's the New Yorker one, hiding inside the skirt of Lady Liberty.
Stephen Miller told us that Lady Liberty quote was added later, so we shouldn't worry about it, about huddled masses.
But it is an ongoing issue. I just think, it's not like he can just issue an executive order, get it, let's talk about something else now. I mean, there's what is going to happen.
And I think that's what I think is different this time.
More than 2,000 kids. What happens at the border now? What happens after 20 days go forth if Flores isn't modified? If you had a serious administration, they would have a strategy for resolving some of the things. They would work with Congress. There'd be an actual meetings going on full-time with congressional leaders. There'd be DHS and HHS meetings to coordinate the agencies. None of that so far.
None of that is done by executive order in the first place. This was not a policy that was implemented by an executive order, and the president does not need to do an executive order to stop this. This is prosecutorial discretion. It's law enforcement agencies up to them to decide whether a mother who's 30 with a 2-year-old son crossing the border is a security threat. Do you prosecute them criminally, or do you put them through the civil system and try to keep them together? It's akin to a police department in a rough neighborhood saying, are we going to put all our resources to prosecute jaywalkers? Is that the best use of the resources? That's also enforcing the law.
In reverse, was that Trump thinks is his ace card. We're enforcing the law, 100% zero tolerance for anyone coming across the border. But that's actually the thing he has to yield on to have a reasonable resolution, I think.
A competent administration, when they adopted the zero tolerance policy, would have thought about the completely obvious effects of that right now. And you're completely right about this executive order. Either it's going to be ineffective in doing what the president says it's going to do, or it's illegal and the courts are going to say, no, you can't keep children in cages without their parents is really bad, but children in cages with their parents, also bad.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.